Good morning. This is Frank Howard of the TotallyHooked.net podcast. This is episode 3 of the podcast, and today we're going to talk about the new website, what it's like living in Washington, D.C., including bad weather on this third Saturday in January. And we're just going to let things roll. We're just going to roll with it. You know what? Today we're just going to roll with it because I thought about doing a plan. I thought about having everything set up. And well, the problem with that is when you start just planning everything out, like I just had 2 or 3 takes that were so awkward and fake. And I was like, all week, okay, I'll put it like this. All week, unlike my last 2 podcasts, all week I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to be fired up for this podcast, and I'm going to, this is going to be the best podcast yet, because I'm hoping that each podcast is like a stepping stone. You keep going up higher to the next level, and I had all these great ideas. I thought of a song to sing. Like one day I was in the car, I was like, I'm going to sing this song. Well, long story short, I wake up, I sleep in, and I feel like, I'm still waking up in the morning, but I don't feel anything like I imagined the podcast would be. So bear with me. But all that being said, to do the NFL analogy, one thing people don't know about players like in the NFL or really any sport, these players are playing, week to week unless they get a bye week. And sometimes they're injured and they have to still play anyway. So that's what we do. That's what we're doing in this podcast. I might feel like crap on this dreary, wintry Saturday morning, and it did. It's that cold thing, but you know what? I'm going to play. I'm going to put a fake smile on my face, and I'm going to enjoy it, because this is a wonderful thing, and I always feel good. I think one of the reasons I'm really getting into this podcasting is because I always feel good afterwards. So that's how I know it's good. So without further ado, let's see what this goes. Let's play the intro music. And welcome. This is Frank Howard of the TotallyHooked.net podcast. And first item of the agenda, TotallyHooked.net. Did you notice that I said TotallyHooked.net? Well, I got it. I got the website. It was kind of a challenge, actually, because I was at GoDaddy. TotallyHooked.com was not available, and I was already fixated on that particular name. I don't know why. After I started recording this podcast last week, I was like, what am I going to name it? And in the past, sorry to keep getting this feedback. I'm hoping to get new equipment and fix this, like the plosives, whatever they call those. I think they're called plosives. That's a silly name, by the way, but sorry if there's plosives in my voice. So, yeah. So Totally Hooked was the first thought that came to my head. And when I envisioned this podcast, and I was like, you know what, it's general enough to be good, but it's just, I don't know why. I just liked it. And then I GoDaddied, and TotallyHooked.com was unavailable. However, actually, TotallyHooked.com was available, but you got to drop 10 grand if you want to get totally hooked. And Frank Howard, old Frankie middle class, can't afford to buy a $10,000 website at this time that hasn't been tested, that hasn't been proven, that as of today has no followers besides possibly my family members, because I've been telling them about it. So a $10,000 debit. A $10,000 debit is probably not a good investment idea when I could, for maybe, it said it was $3 to actually on GoDaddy to purchase TotallyHooked.net, But when all is said and done, after you get the hosting, after you get the security, after you get everything, it ends up being like, I think it's like $60 or $100, which is, to me, is pretty amazing that you can still buy a website. Like, this is 2015. I hate to date these podcasts. Actually, I don't hate to date these podcasts. This is 2015. It's 2015, and the totallyhooked.net was available. And I took it. I took that real estate. I put up my money. But what was interesting, so I GoDaddied it, and it said that it was available. And I was like, okay, good. And then when I got there, I went ahead and ordered it and everything. There was a little, so like when you go, after you purchase it, there's these little boxes, and it said like pending. I was like, pending? And it said, I can't remember the exact words, but if you ever ordered a website, you'd probably know what I'm talking about, and it didn't have it. It was like waiting for the other person. Basically, GoDaddy didn't officially have it. They had to wait until that website was auctioned, or until the other owner gave it back, or there was something where you just couldn't get it instantly. I started freaking out. I was like, oh, did I just order this website, and then is it not even going to be anything? And is this going to be months before totallyhooked.net is even ready? And I've already been doing podcasts, and I already made. So to go back even further, when you're building stuff so I saw on GoDaddy that totallyhooked.net was available. I immediately started designing logos. I started even writing in this podcast, and I started imagining what totallyhooked.net would be like. And then, when you see it, you're like, oh man, after all that work, I might have to think of another crazy name while I'm on the toilet. Imagining another crazy name while I'm in the shower. Trying to find another crazy name while I'm in the car on my way to work. Trying to find another crazy name while I'm in D.C. commuting on the Silver Line because the Silver Line is ready. Yeah, so there's another. It's hard coming up with a name. You know what? I just said go with it. Just like at the very beginning of this podcast, we're just going to roll with it. I just decided to roll with it. That was the first. Totallyhooked.net was the first. Well, just the words totally hooked were the first thoughts that came to my mind. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. With podcasting, it's all about getting totally hooked. I am totally hooked to a lot of podcasts, and I was like, that's kind of what I want to do. I want to get totally hooked on this. I want to be totally hooked and be consistent. That's the thing that I decided to read a few blogs, educate myself, make myself more aware of some of the challenges that podcasters have. And one of the things that they keep saying is, when you start developing an audience and you start creating a podcast, you need to set the expectations by being consistent. You got to see it like a business. You got to be professional. And I was thinking, how hard could it be once a week to give an hour to this? And I don't know how hard that'll be. Today it seemed a little bit harder because instead of just grabbing the mic and getting started like I did now, I sat down with a little piece of paper, with my Word document, and I was like, what am I going to talk about that's entertaining today? And I started to think about writing and all this stuff. When in reality, I was like, and then I did 3 or 4 takes trying to fake this song that I thought of and put everything together. And then I said, you know what, Mike? You're forgetting the very, very first. There's this demo podcast, which I doubt will ever get released, but the very first one. So I just woke up one Saturday morning a week ago. Gosh, that was a week ago. I just woke up one Saturday morning. I took out my iPhone. I hooked up the headphones. I just plugged in my headphones, the regular headphones that you use that come with the iPhone 6. And I just started recording. And then surprisingly, the first 3 minutes seemed like hell. They were awkward. The next 3 minutes were still awkward, but they weren't as awkward. And then I just got into a flow, and before I knew it, a whole hour had gone by, and I talked about a lot of really interesting things, and it was actually an entertaining podcast. I would probably listen to it myself if I were just driving in a car and I was already hooked on the podcast. I would just, and I think that would have been a valuable thing. I think I talked about a lot of valuable things, about some valuable insights. And when it was done, I started cleaning. I started feeling good. And I started, just feeling really nice. And I think that's just something to be said about, like, creativity. If you're out there and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to live life? Like, if you're down, if you're trying to, I got to say, like, just try doing something, taking action on something. It was just so therapeutic. It truly was kind of like, I might even have to write about that moment, because for weeks before that, for months, I'm going through basically like New Year's resolution stuff, and it felt, what it felt like? It felt like the feeling of success after working out. Do you guys work out? Does my audience work out? Another podcasting thing that they talk about is an avatar. You need to imagine who your typical podcasting listener is. And what is that? I imagine that maybe you do like working out, because you're not just going to settle for the couch. You're not just going to settle for watching Netflix on a Saturday night. No, sir. You are going to be ambitious. You're going to be professional. You're going to be healthy, or at least striving to be healthy as your body, the DNA that's been given to you, and all that. So back to the Totally Hooked. I'm sitting there trying to get my access. I got my totallyhooked.net website, and then I decided that that's going to be it. And I thought it wasn't going to work, and then it started to work. What a wonderful story. What a earth-shattering story. So what is it like living in the Washington, D.C. area? I'd like to talk about that for a little while, and it might be another ongoing theme that we talk about on the totallyhooked.net podcast. I've lived in the Beltway for 7 years now, and in this area around the Potomac, Northern Virginia, Maryland, D.C. A lot of people don't understand the proximity of things. First off, when you first get here, you look at the map, you Google Washington, D.C., you see D.C. I don't know if people understand how close everything is. And the prime example of that is the Pentagon. If you're over in Alexandria, Virginia, and there's this hill over there, because I used to live kind of in that area, and you can see the Pentagon, and then across the Potomac, you can see Washington, D.C. The Pentagon, even though it's in quote-unquote Arlington, Virginia, I mean, it is literally right there. I mean, you just cross a little bridge, and then you're in the District of Columbia. And it's funny how much things are gentrified. Not gentrified. Gentrified is when you take... it's kind of like when there's like an urban environment, and then you got young hipsters that buy up those urban things because they're trying to be hip, and they gentrify the what was once kind of like an urban city into a young up and coming residential area, something like that. That's how I understand it. I could be wrong, and it might be one of many mistakes I make, but I'm pretty sure that's what gentrification is. Anyway, that was a digression. But so the Pentagon's really close to Washington, D.C. Everything's really close. There's this huge temple. There's this huge temple. There's a bunch of there's this Masonic Masonic. There's a Masonic temple in Alexandria that looks like a lighthouse. It is huge. It's like a headquarters. It's one of the top buildings in the Freemason group. And there's a why am I talking about that? Because I've been watching a lot of the history on the Freemasons, and it just fascinates me the mythology that comes out after those things. And there's these guys on the internet. They'll take like the streets, because the guy L'Enfant, I believe is his name, named after the L'Enfant Plaza, I believe, because I used to metro out of there all the time. Anyway, they were all Freemasons. They say that the whole city was built by Freemasons. So you see all kinds of symbology around the city, the shapes of the streets. You walk around and you'll see like a lot of Freemason symbols. So that's how shows and movies like the Da Vinci Code got so popular. But if you go onto YouTube, you can find real niche like particulars that some guy with a British accent, he's talking like a British bloke, and I'm a sucker for that. When I listen to it, when I hear a guy with a good British accent, I'm like, this guy is really smart. He's got good ideas. It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. When he says like the streets in D.C. are a Masonic conspiracy, I believe him, because he's got that really intelligent upper class British voice. Yes, he does. Anyway, so what it's like today in Washington D.C. Well, today it's wet. Last night we had a wintry mix. We've been getting snow on and off all week, and last week, the last 2 weeks have been snowy, but we live near the Potomac, and it's D.C. is like right in the middle. I mean, they always say the Mason-Dixon line, but I think the Virginia-Maryland line is where you start to really see, like, in Northern Virginia, that's like the last of the South before, and then you get into D.C. and then Maryland. You're starting to get northern values. You start getting more northern values juxtaposed with the southern values. So it's an interesting little conundrum. And we get a lot of weather over here. We get a lot of weather. We get a lot of weather over here. I wonder if people said in like Hawaii, we get a lot of weather. A lot of good weather, but it's a lot of weather. The weather outside is weather. Anybody see Forgetting Sarah Marshall and remember Paul Rudd? Paul Rudd is so funny in that movie. He's like, the weather outside is weather. I love that. I love it. I absolutely love that. Why? Because if you remember the original wording of that song, it was the weather outside is frightful. Frightful. What a hardcore word to use in a Christmas song. Frightful. That's why didn't that's more of like a Halloween song. I mean, the weather outside is frightful. Frightful. Jesus. No, that's why I like him saying the weather outside is weather, because the weather outside is weather. No matter where you are in the world, the weather outside is weather. That's some serious stoner, some serious stoner talk. No, not really. Well, maybe stoner talk, more like surfer talk, because that's who Paul Rudd played in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He played a surfer dude, and he had a lot of wise things to say. What else did he say? He was like, when life gives you lemons, just say fuck the lemons and bail. I mean, I'm messing that up, but it was just so funny. I just mess that up. If you like that movie, just Google it. I don't know why I love that movie. Maybe it's because I watched it when I was going through a little bit of a relationship transition, and it was at the time it was a really good, what do they call it? A relief, not a relief, but it's just a good movie. It was funny. I also like Russell, the guy, the British guy who practices transcendental meditation. I'm gonna look him up right now. Cause I'm gonna mess it up. I can't believe... I don't want to waste your time. Your time is important. Russell Brand. Okay, Russell Brand. People are going to hate on... hate is going to hate on Russell Brand because him and Katy Perry had their falling out. Because, like, when I say... I've told people Russell Brand... I like Russell Brand because he practices transcendental medication. He practices transcendental meditation. And he's a hardcore advocate for it. And people, number one, they're like, what the hell is transcendental meditation? At least some of the people I say. And then number two is Russell Brand is an asshole because he caused the breakup of Katy Perry. Now, I don't know what happened, but when you tell a woman about Russell Brand in 2011, 2012, I think, they're just going to have Russell Brand in this box called... he's a douchebag. They put Russell Brand in the douchebag. And I can hear a lot of people right now, well, Russell Brand is a douchebag. Have you seen that guy? He's a fucking idiot. And I think you're right. And he would probably agree with you. However, there is no however. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, whatever. He's a douchebag. He's a douchebag who supports transcendental meditation. Which I also practice transcendental meditation. Maybe that makes me a douchebag. Maybe I'm a douchebag. Maybe it's... Yeah, I'm not even going to defend it. I'm not going to deflect it. I'm not going to hide it. Maybe I'm a douchebag. And maybe it's okay to be a douchebag. Maybe being a douchebag is going to be like what being a nerd is in 2014, but being a douchebag in 2017 will be like what being a nerd is now. What I mean by that is being a nerd has never been cooler, especially in Washington, D.C. area. I'll say that because, and maybe us D.C. people, we're always like the latest to the party in terms of hip stuff. We got a bunch of lawyers, a bunch of up-and-coming professionals. We got people with degrees. I think per capita, we've got like some of the most elitist people in the country. Well, not elitist, but like people from elite schools. Like my neighbor, he lives somewhere on my first floor. He went to Harvard. You go to the parking lot, my little parking lot. I'm not like a super wealthy guy or anything, but you know the parking lot where I live, you got Lexus, you got Audi, you got a Hummer. There's a freaking Hummer in my parking lot where I live. I'm like, okay, there's nothing wrong with Hummers. It's just like parking spots in where I live are really small. Like even though I was saying like you got Lexus, I drive a Lexus, Audis, BMWs, but they're all like the small models. It's like my Lexus is the IS 250, which is a smaller. It's a 4-door, but it's barely a 4-door sedan. You know what I mean? It's an IS 250. There's the 3 Series BMWs and the Audi Quattros all over the place. So it's that's for that's where I am professionally, where everyone probably who lives here is probably at the similar kind of place where you don't need in some ways a bigger car is kind of a liability. That's why that Hummer always sticks out because man, that takes up just about every inch of the parking spot. Like for a while there, I was thinking of, I was a Ford guy for a while. Before I had my Lexus, I drove a Mustang. A Mustang GT, son, 2008 with that badass grill. God, I love that car. The engine just sounded so good, and it drove so well. But in this last year, around this time, we got a lot of crappy weather and rear-wheel drive. I didn't want to have 2 cars. I should have had 2 cars. I should have kept my little SUV because I had a Honda Passport for a while. It's kind of like a Honda Pilot. It's based on the Rodeo, the former Rodeo, which I like that car. That car could handle the weather around here. But I got this all-wheel drive, fully loaded, black Lexus IS 250. I always wanted a Lexus, so I got myself a Lexus after I finished my MBA. It was my little gift to me. Good for me. Yay! In defense of the Lexus, I have not had any issues at all. Like, it is the lowest maintenance car. It runs amazingly. It's the engine's nice. The parts are throughout the country because it's got Toyota parts. A lot of times they'll compare. They try to make comparisons with like luxury sedans. You know, for a while there, a lot of people, it was like Mercedes is this is just we're talking middle class, upper luxury sedans. This is before you get to like, we're not talking like Maseratis and Bentleys. We're talking, just your middle class professionals who drive a Mercedes, who drive Audi, BMW, and Lexus. Those are kind of the four, and I would say Lexus is probably like third or fourth in most people's minds. But it's very underrated because I have friends, I know people who drive BMWs. Getting BMWs fixed is a pain in the ass. Audi's the same thing. You got to take it to the dealer, and it's really hard to find parts, as far as I've been told. And I can imagine that Mercedes is the worst in terms of that. But of course, when you go into that, you have to go into that knowing it. I mean, I think most people who own those vehicles, they understand that if they have maintenance for a import, they're going to have to do that. And it's a good trade-off, especially with Lexus. I like my American cars, don't get me wrong. I love my Ford. I wanted to get a Ford F-150, honestly. I think the Ford F-150 is just a badass truck. I have always kind of wanted a Ford F-150 truck. But in this area, for now, while I'm here in D.C., I'll just keep my nice little Lexus. So I went with Lexus. And the good thing about imports is, the Japanese are excellent car makers. The pursuit of perfection, as they say. So I don't want to make this this versus that car versus, because it's like people are, some people it's like I think it's so stupid, especially now, maybe 5 years ago, but there's still this Samsung iPhone. Like it's a thing. Like people will debate. You can actually engage in debate like an election, like a Republican-Democrat election between like iPhones and Samsungs. And I'm sure there's a lot of, I wanted to use the C word. There's a lot of cunts. There's a lot of cunts out there that are going to try to talk about, well, my Lexus versus your BMW versus your... Yeah, you can just look it up. Do whatever's good for you. If buying a brand new car with all the fixins is good for you, do that. If comparing, doing the research, buying maybe a semi-used car is up your alley, do that. Do whatever works for you. Because we're in a free country and we don't get shot at for our views. I hope not. I hope we never come to the point where if you're trying to express something, you're going to have to worry at night and stay up, worrying that somebody's going to kill you. I think a lot of that is also, I think there is some truth to that. Yeah, you could worry about getting killed. But I think how much of that is also just part of being human is being afraid of being killed by other humans. And what I mean is I'm just saying what I believe the consensus on science is telling me is that we as humans, when I say we, I mean we humans, existed in small tribes of 150 people. And if you said something that didn't jive with the tribe, it very well meant your life. You could have gotten killed. So the humans that were able to survive had developed and created this emotion called fear, and fear actually allowed humans to survive more. So fear is actually a good thing. Fear, we're in 30 minutes. Woo-woo! Fear gave humans permission to live longer because they needed to be afraid. Because if you weren't afraid, you're just like, fuck you, motherfucker, and got your ass killed. You exercised your free speech in a time when free speech was not valued. But here in America, because this podcast is in America, we value our right to express ourselves. Which, I got to be honest, especially in this area, a lot of Americans, and I hope there's an international audience here. I hope that I'm, like global enough. I hope I'm intelligent enough to get fans all around the world. But what am I going to say? We really value freedom in this country, and it can easily be taken for granted. That's what I was going to think. Because if you're born as a baby, your whole life you've had freedom, you're not thinking, you just don't appreciate it, because it's like, maybe to use the car analogy, most people, they were born into cars. They've always had cars. They haven't had to walk everywhere their entire life. I don't think there's a single person in this country, probably. There's very few, and if there were, it'd probably be really hard to find them, who's never enjoyed the luxury of driving in a car from point A to point B. I don't think there's very few people who've literally walked everywhere their entire life. Maybe some like Quakers, or is that the right term for them? Quakers, pilgrims. You know what I'm talking about. The people who ride in carriages and use horse and buggies. They did a lot of reality shows about them recently. The Mafia, the Quaker Mafia, or something like that. I saw it on like one of those channels. Anyway, yeah, they have that. So we value freedom. We value our right to free speech. And freedom isn't always free. That's what they say. They say freedom isn't free because, people had to die in order to... It's like Jesus. Jesus had to die in order for our sins to be forgiven. So in World War... whichever wars, people had to die so that we could have our freedoms. There's truth to that, but it's also just kind of funny. I'm not a hardcore religious person or anything, but, I like to take whatever symbols and analogies are out there in the universe and use them to effectively and efficiently communicate a complex or simple idea. So that's what it's like living in Washington, D.C. You got people like me who just nod my head, do my job. No, I do more than just do my job. I have a sense of duty for my profession. I feel like I'm blessed to be in this area. So that goes to my point. When I first came up here, I saw like Northern Virginia, I saw Maryland, and I saw D.C., and I was like, people that live outside of Maryland, outside of D.C., I was like, that's not really D.C. But there's all these like... Yeah, it's not gentrified, but like you might have a mile or a certain set of miles of like one county, and then you go like to another neighborhood. It's a completely different group of people, a completely different group of everything. And there's, Arlington County, and I'm going to speak about Northern Virginia because that's for the most part where I live. I like the more comfortable lifestyle that affords living in Northern Virginia. And when I say comfortable lifestyle, people who live in Northern Virginia might not see it as comfortable. When I say comfortable, what I mean is comfortable compared to living in Washington, D.C. itself. Now, people in Washington, D.C., they always tell me that they love it, but I don't know how you can love not having a car. I don't know how you could love, having to carry your groceries from Harris Teeter to your place. I don't know how you could love having to have a roommate. I don't know how you could love not access to gyms. I don't know. But it's a different beast. It's a different thing. I don't question it. I don't care. I'll be honest. I really don't care. What I care about is my own personal comfort, my own personal lifestyle. And I like surrounding myself with a parking lot full of Lexus, Audis, BMWs. And man, I hope I don't get a lot of crap for talking about my car. Listen, guys, it's just a car, okay? I'm not like oh yeah, Mike, must be nice. I'm going to try to be positive here. I worked hard for everything that I've got. I'm a self-made guy. Since the age of 18, more or less, I've been out of the house. I served in the military. I've been working since age 15 and haven't taken a break. I paid for college on my own. I served my country on my own. And I have a job here in D.C. Everything I have, I had to work very hard for. I wasn't given a silver spoon. So when I talk about my Lexus, yes, I'm proud of my Lexus. But people... It's so stupid because a Lexus isn't even like, in my mind, a Lexus isn't even like, it's luxury. Everything about it is luxury, and yes, I'm happy about it. But it's not really a status thing, to be honest. Everybody, I technically live in McLean, Virginia, and everybody has, it's like Jesus. On a Saturday morning, there's like a lot of like supercars and stuff like that out here. And, I don't know. I mean, a Lexus, it's not like a Lexus or like a luxury car. I think used to be a lot more harder to attain. I'll put it to you like that. They used to buy a luxury car, you used to have to pay a lot of money, and they didn't have a lot of options, and it was more rare. But I don't know. I'm just saying. This is my podcast. I apologize if you are upset because you're driving a, 1985 Camry that's maroon, which I used to own one. That's why I said it. That was my first car. It was a 1985 maroon Camry. It was 1998 when I was driving it. I worked at a grocery store to purchase that car, and it was a fun car. I had so much fun in that car because when you first get a car like that you don't care if it falls apart, you don't care if anything happens because you're in high school and you just bought it. I put bumper stickers all over it. That was just a fun car to have. Anyway, it's funny how cars kind of, they sort of are a reflection of the people and everything. I look at that Lexus, I'm like, yeah, because people are like, well, whatever. What's cool about having a smaller car in this area is it's easier to park. Like, parking's a lot easier. And if you can put things in sports mode, or if you can I say bob and weave, I don't even know if that's the right term, but you can just, like the Mustang especially, you could just go through other cars really fast when you're traveling because there's so much congestion here. If you can move in and move out really fast, more power to you. I don't know what it's like with a big Ford F-150, how easy it is in traffic. I do know that I get the only cars that really pass me are big ass trucks. I don't really get passed by other like smaller cars. It's always surprising to me. I don't get passed by a lot of the other. It's always like a big Ford F-150, a big ass truck, and usually it's got like a Marine Corps sticker on the back. I do love. I like the Marines, by the way. I never served in the Marines. I know it's like everyone I met in the Marines are just cool people. That's just my own experience. Maybe you've met Marines that you didn't like. I don't know. But the Marines that have made it to the top, and when I say the top, I mean they've got great jobs here in D.C., good jobs here in D.C., great jobs here in D.C., those are just cool guys. They're just super, like everything in their life is organized. And I'm like, I want to be like that. I want to be like where, and I want to be so not in your face, but I want to see so authentic and a genuine man where like people just know where they stand. I'm just thinking of a few of the Marines I've known, and one thing that's been consistent about like the ones that I've known on a personal level is you know very clearly where you stand with them. And I think that's a lot of I think that's a respectful trait to have in a man. Because I think that's a good trait to have in a man. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think it's better to kind of hold your cards and not let anybody know? Or is it better to just draw a line in the sand and say, listen, this is who I am. This is what I like. This is how it is for me. I like those people that are, consistent. And on the flip side of that, there's also these like, you don't see too many over here in D.C., the creative types, the hipster artist. There's a lot of those in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I grew up, where I went to school at the University of Tennessee. I think for a while there, Knoxville was like one of the big hubs of hupsters. Hupsters. That's why we need to change the word from hipster to hupster. I'm a hupster. It rhymes with pupster. I like trucksters. Oh my God. Cringe. I hope if you didn't cringe to that, there's something wrong with you, because that was a horrible, horrible joke. That wasn't even a joke. Okay, the word of the day. I think it's time that we did the word of the day, folks. We're 41 minutes into this podcast, by the way. My goal, just to set expectations for people listening. Ideally, I think a podcast for this should be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. I don't want to go too much. I definitely don't want to go under 45 minutes, but I hope to go usually well over 45 minutes to probably around 60 minutes, but things happen. I'm actually kind of impressed that I've already gone 41 minutes, and it feels like I haven't even really been talking about shit. I haven't been talking about shit. Nothing. And yet, I think it's valuable stuff, though. I think it's really important, like the cars and everything. And maybe I have one angle, and maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about. And maybe some other people have a better sense of what kind of car to drive. So maybe if you feel like commenting or anything, what kind of car do you drive? What kind of car do you like to drive? Okay. The word for today is evitable. Evitable means capable of being avoided. Evitable. I'll spell it out. E-V-I-T-A-B-L. Evitable. Here's evitable used in a sentence. The investigator determined that the accident was certainly evitable and would not have happened if the driver hadn't been negligent. So that could have been avoided. The accident could have been avoided had the driver not been negligent. It's interesting that we're talking about driving. So, me buying my Lexus was certainly evitable had I kept my Mustang. It was so crazy when I was buying that too. Like the lady, she was a young lady, very attractive, that was selling me when I was trading it in. She was like, I don't think I ever seen anything like that. I don't think I've ever seen a person go from a Ford Mustang, from a Ford Mustang to a Toyota Lexus. And I don't think, it's kind of for those kind of cars, it's kind of a wide spectrum. You're going from the bad boy muscle car to the white collar yuppie, a white collar yuppie. Okay, what am I talking about? I just maybe I don't think this is offending anybody. I haven't said anything offensive, but you never know. There's some sensitive people out there. You definitely never know. Okay, so yesterday I'm a member of this subscription box called Loot Crate, and yesterday my Loot Crate came in. It's kind of cool. You pay I don't know what the subscription is, but once a month they send you this box, and I like the Loot Crate because it has, I'm not advertising here. This is not me getting paid. This isn't a sponsor. This is just my life. I got, you get a t-shirt every month, and it's a nerdy t-shirt, but usually it's kind of hip. And I like to have I just like to have t-shirts to work out in and stuff. So I got this t-shirt. It's a really cool robot t-shirt. Last month, I think it was a Super Mario t-shirt. I get these cool glasses. I got this comic notebook. It's just like a bunch of little, it's what I imagine, if my mom was a hipster and she wanted to fill my stocking up with a bunch of nerdy shit, that's what Loot Crate is. Loot Crate is once a month you get stocking stuffers, a little box full of stocking stuffers once a month. I figure, fuck it, I'll have Christmas year round because I'm a single guy and I can do that. That's a good conversation too. Maybe at some point we could have this conversation about single versus relationship. I've been in relationships. I've never been married. And I like being single. I'm at an interesting age, I think, where, I've experienced enough in life. I'm 32 years old. And I know too much. Well, no, I don't know too much. I don't know. Things are starting to be pretty good for me. I think I'm moving on up, and I'll leave it at that. I'm moving on up, and I think if people are feeling bad for me, they might be making a mistake there. I think sometimes people are like, oh, you should be in a relationship, and they're mistakenly having the wrong emotion for me. And if I were to, do the same, in some ways, I don't want to say I feel bad. So there's a lot of really happily married people, but there's also a lot of people who don't get much sleep at night because they stay up too late, and because they have a kid. I can think of one person in particular right now. But yeah, so that's sort of what it's like living in Washington, D.C., complaining. In Washington, D.C., there's a lot of smart people. I've never seen more entitled... I've never seen more entitled ladies. I've never seen more entitled young ladies. And men, too. I'm not going to lie. It's not just... I don't want to just, single out the ladies. Because you already get a bunch of shit up here in D.C. You guys have been promised that the man you're going to meet is going to be at your same level or higher in education. And you got a PhD from Harvard. And you won't settle for anyone less. And good for you. And the guys here are kind of similar. It's kind of hit me too. When I was, I remember before I moved up to DC, my standards, how do I put it, were a little bit lower. I had lower standards. And after, dating more and more people, my standards went up. And I think as your standards go up, you do become more attractive. But at some point, it's also one of those, it can work against you. And if you think you're a 9 when you're really a 7, which can easily happen here in DC, because some people think that education adds to your attractiveness level. If you're deluded like that, then you're not going to be happy, and you might treat other people negatively. But that's not everybody. That could be just what they're not saying. Because in my experience, most people are actually really nice up here. People are actually super nice to get to know you. Like, I think, and what's interesting around here is most girls are just open. I gotta say, like, if I just, it's so, it's actually kind of easy for me. Like, if I just go start talking to a girl and just ask for her number, I don't think I've ever been, like, told no, like, up here. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been told no. But there's, like, that's the thing, though. People think, oh, if I get a girl's phone number, because it's obvious that's not, I learned a long while back, that's not going to take you. Getting a girl's phone number is just like, that's just the very beginning. It's not like the end. I had to go through a phase where I was like trying to figure all that stuff out, how to go to the next level. So this is episode 3. We talked about what it's like living in DC for the most part here. We talked about how good it feels if you're living life to the fullest. If you're, like for me, after I finish a podcast, I'm re-energized. I'm ready to clean. I'm ready to live the rest of my day. And that might leave you with a good question. You can ask yourself this right now. What are you doing to live your life to the fullest? What are you doing to take yourself to the next level today? Not tomorrow, not in the future, because we often get caught in the past. We think about the past, what maybe we've been given, or we think too much about the future. We've got too many goals. What are you doing right now? Because this is a podcast, you don't have to be just listening to this podcast. You can have your headphones on and be doing something else. What are you doing right now to make yourself better? Now, it could be just listening to this podcast. Although, right now, the way this podcast is it's not marketed as a self-improvement podcast, but it might turn into that if people start getting motivated. But, all of a sudden I'm getting motivated, so I'm thinking, how can I make myself better? What kind of actions can you do right now that are going to make your life just a little bit better? Is it getting your environment set up? That's the big one for me. It's just making my environment clean. Because when as above, so below, as the Egyptians used to say, if things are looking good all around your little apartment, things are probably good in the head. If things are good in the head, things are probably good in your apartment. As above, so below, as they say. So I think that concludes today's TotallyHooked.net podcast. I'm Frank Howard. I hope you have a terrific day. Hope you have a terrific week. If you're listening to this and you're going to listen to episode 4, enjoy it. I haven't created episode 4 yet, so I don't know what it's going to be like, but I hope it's a good one. Okay, that's it. This is Frank Howard. Hope you have a great day. Peace out.